I looked at this picture of you in the old magazine here, and boy, you do look like Davy Jones in this shot.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yep, that's me. And especially if you're in a moving limo, you know, they're for sure they think I'm Davy.
We're here with Barbara Hammacker, who was one of the, quote, Monkee Girls that worked in the Raybert office. She has never spoken, as far as I know, publicly about the Monkees in many, many years. So we're welcoming you on the MonkeesPad today. Thank you so much, Barbara, for visiting.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So why don't you tell me how you started? I believe you started... you were working at KHJ, the famous radio station in Los Angeles,
right,
as an assistant for Don Berrigan.
Right. I was Boss Radio, 93 KHJ. My first job, 1965. I went for an interview there. I hadn't even graduated from secretarial school, and they hired me. Shocking. So that's how I started.
So Don left KHJ and he took you with him, right?
Yes, right. We did the Last Train to Clarksville promotion, and Bert Schneider and Bob Rafelson were on the train, as was I and a million other people. And they liked, you know, they needed a PR man that was separate from Screen Gems. They wanted their own guy. And so that's why they hired Don, and Don asked me to go with him, and I did.
So what was your first entree to work, being hired by Burton? Did they interview you?
I remember going in the first day and I was scared to death, to be honest with you. I was terrified, you know, to drive on the lot of Columbia Pictures and Screen Gems, and I met everybody. I met there were three other secretaries in the office. And, you know, they sort of showed me around. I found out much later that once they met me, they took a bet that I wouldn't last a week. So I think it's a good thing they didn't tell me that sooner. Anyway.
Well, you were admittedly very green. You were.
I was green,
fish in a big pond.
Yeah, and I was 10 years younger, to be honest with you. All the women, I was 20. I think Marilyn was in her early 30s. I think there was another Barbara there that was in her early 30s, and as was Linda. So you know, I wasn't hip. You know, I was from Tucson. I didn't speak the lingo.
Did they refer to you as the Monkee Girls or the Monkee?
I was called Barbara Monkee.
You were called Barbara Monkee.
I was called Barbara Monkee, and up until the time I moved, I had a little plaque because it didn't get in with the boxes that said Barbara Monkee, and then there was the Monkee guitar logo on it. But I was Barbara Monkee. Part of the reason for that was that there were two other Barbaras that worked in that office.
You were interviewed by whom? Rafelson or Schneider, or both?
Neither one. I just was, I'm pretty sure I met them on the Clarksville promotion, which Don and I had done. I wasn't interviewed. The whole office was so different than KHJ because it was so relaxed. We were in an old apartment building they had renovated the apartment building so it was sort of like one long train of, there were maybe originally 3 apartments, and they just rehabbed them so that the whole, from my office, which was at one, Don's office, which was at one end, to Bert's office, which was at the other end. If I wanted to talk to Bert or Linda, I just had to walk through everybody else's office all the way down. Marilyn, Ward, Bob Rafelson and Linda and Bert. So it was, it was an adjustment, to say the least. Not a lot of privacy.
So what were your quote duties the first month or two that you were there?
I was in charge of interfacing with all of the fan magazines and Tiger Beat and all of them. And I was in charge of the 8x10 glossies of the boys. And we would get hundreds and hundreds of requests for photographs. So I was taught how to sign all of the boys' signatures. I'm sorry, apologize to everyone who has one of the glossies. And so I learned how to sign all their names. And that took up hours of time almost every day signing those things. And to this day, I can sign all the photographs. When I went to work for them, I had no idea that somebody signed somebody else's autograph. I mean, I was just a babe in the woods. I didn't know that went on. I mean, and I was just fortunate, because I'm a craftsperson to begin with. I'm fortunate to be good with my hands, so it was real easy for me to just sign their signatures. That wasn't a problem.
How were you approached to with the proposition you were going to be forging the Monkees' names from now on? How did you learn to do the signatures? Was it taught to you, or you just picked it up on your own?
I just somebody, I don't remember who was doing them when I don't know whether the other barber was doing them. I don't know whether Marilyn was doing some of them. I don't know who was doing them, but they just probably plunked down this box of 500 photos and said, get going and practice until you get it right. And that's what happened. That's how it happened. It was very matter of fact. And it is what it was. They would get up to 400 telephone calls a day for the Monkees. And they would try and just say they're not in, they're not here, you can't speak to them, yada yada. But every once in a while, one would get through. After school every day, where our building was located, there was a chain link fence right outside. So there would always be 10 or 15, sometimes 20 girls outside of the entrance to our apartment building downstairs wanting autographs. Where is Davy? Where's Mickey? I need to see Peter. Where's Michael? And so we had for a very long time, we had a retinue of young girls who were in love with the boys, which is wonderful. When I think back on it, I felt so badly that we couldn't, produce them at will, because they weren't there. Usually they were on the set, or they were at the ranch, or they were on location. Well, I had met them
on the last train to Clarksville.
I had met them on the train, but not particularly. I was a worker there doing stuff, so on the train. But I met them the next day. Whenever they had a break in filming, they usually would come up to up the stairs. The apartment building had a stairway that just came straight up to my office. So the door would open, and there they would be, and they would come in. Hi, how are you? And it would sort of like be, suddenly there was this complete chaos, because they were full of energy. Either that, or they were really tired, and they'd come by and they'd come through and they'd say hi to everybody. And then they would usually make their way to Bob and Bert's offices. So that was my first introduction. I realize now that I think that I had started at the beginning of the second season, and they didn't know me at all. And so I didn't really have, how when you're with a group of people that start something like that, it's very different when you come in a year later. And so I didn't have that kind of a relationship with them. They were all great. Mickey probably was the one that was most, he seemed to be in a cloud of his own kind of energy. And I think that comes across in the shows. Mickey has this great kinetic personality, and he probably came in more focused on making his way, to Bert's office or whatever. I don't know. Davey would come in, and all of them, if I had stuff on my desk, all of them would play with all the stuff on my desk. If I had a clock, they'd pick it up. They do, they were sort of in the mood of whatever sequence they had just finished filming, and they were all very curious kind of guys.
Like Monkees.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, whenever we heard them coming upstairs, it's sort of like you wanted to hold onto your desk to make sure that they didn't take it with them when they left.
How are their individual personalities? Everyone tells me how different.
Yeah, they were very different.
So how are they different?
Davey was I would say, very kind and curious, wanted to ask questions. Mickey, I think I described a little bit. Peter was also, Peter was really a sweet person, a gentle person, and would always look you in the eye and want to talk about things. Michael was very cerebral. When we were on the tour, Michael was the one, when they were waiting to go on and I was always backstage doing stuff, Michael would always want to sit and talk. So that was sort of Michael's personality, very, very centered and very controlled.
Now, when the 1967 summer tour arose, tell me about how you wound up being a part of it and what did you do on it? What was that like?
Yeah, I had been with them several months. Don Berrigan, who was my boss, called me into his office one day. As I recall, it was about 2 or 3 weeks before the tour started. And he dictated a letter to me. I took shorthand. And he resigned. And I was in shock. Having been worked with him at KHJ, KHJ was a very structured environment. There were chains of authority, and there were a lot of really straight people there. I remember a lot of people that were accountants and all of that kind of stuff. And Raybert was crazy making. I happen to like that better. I mean, I got along really well with Bob and Bert and I got along with everybody. But at that age, I wasn't really quite ready for, being without Don. And about, I guess a few days later, a week later, I'm sure Marilyn had talked to Bert and Bob about it. They asked me to go on the tour with. They wanted me to go on the tour with them, and I had to go home and decide whether I was going to go on this, 2-month tour with them by myself, meaning I couldn't drag my boyfriend with me, and Don wasn't going to be there. So I was scared to death, but I said yes. Thank God. That's how it happened.
The first date was with Jimi Hendrix, right?
Let's see. It was in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. So we all got to the concert hall, and there was Lynn Rendell and the rest of the gang that was the Sundowners were, and the audience just was full of girls who wanted to see the Monkees. So there was this long, sort of protracted, this group and this group and this group, and Jimi Hendrix, I guess, was going on after the Sundowners, and he hadn't shown up yet, and we were in backstage thinking, oh my God, is what's happening? And suddenly the back door opened, and I didn't know who Jimi Hendrix was. And Jimmy walked in, they were all dressed in a very bright colored satin kind of outfits. And I seem to recall one of them had a cape, and it may have been Jimmy, I don't know. Jimi Hendrix went on stage and began their set. And everybody, everybody was kind of shocked that hadn't seen them. I had never seen them. By the end of it, I was in love with them. Hendrix was brilliant, but he, did various things with the guitar on stage, at the end of which time he set his guitar on fire on stage. And I seem to recall that the audience was as probably pretty shocked. And I don't think at that point they did any booing, but I think then when the boys came on, that was a big relief.
Oh, yeah.
The Jimi Hendrix Experience, that was the name of their group. Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding and Jimi Hendrix.
What did you ever have any conversations with them, or did you hang out between shows?
I did. You know what? They were as nice as they could be. I don't remember actually having conversations with Mitch and Noel. Every once in a while, I got to sit next to Jimmy on the airplane. We had our own plane, and Jimmy was just like the guy next door. He was kind and sweet, interesting to talk to. And I remember one night in one of the hotels, not the motels, but it must have been in a bigger city, where we were all on one floor, and we were all going to go out and have Chinese food. And Jimmy I kept waiting for him to come around the corner, and finally I went back and I said, Jimmy, come on, the limos are all leaving. And he was trying to comb his hair. He was trying to make his hair look good. And I just always remember that. I thought, it's really a privilege to be around people that are very, very famous and find out they're just regular guys, So that's a very strong memory. And then I think I sat next to Jimmy in the Chinese restaurant, and we all had great food.
What you celebrated your 21st birthday during the tour, and they threw a party for you at one of the hotels. Do you remember? Yeah,
we were at the Warwick Hotel in New York City, and we were there twice. They did recordings. They had recordings done there, and so I had my 21st birthday. Lester Sill from Cole Gems Music took me downstairs and bought me a drink at the bar. Although in New York you can drink when you're 18, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I loved Lester. Lester was a great guy. He was in the offices all the time, and then they had a cake and a party, and Peter put some sort of a temporary, I think it was a butterfly tattoo on my wrist, and there were a bunch of people there. And it was a birthday I'll never forget. It was pretty amazing.
Well, I know the Sundowners were there.
Right.
Mickey, Ward Sylvester, David, Peter, Samantha Dolans was there. Samantha just at the time.
Yes, Sammy came back with them. Sammy was on the tour in Jacksonville because she flew back with them from England. They came from their tour that they had done in England, which I was not included in. They arrived back in Jacksonville. So yeah, Sammy was there. And a very sweet lady, very wonderful person.
What do you remember of the Sundowners?
Oh, the Sundowners were probably, some of them looked younger than I was. I have to be honest. They were young guys. I think there were 5 of them. The one thing I do remember, I don't remember their names, but one of them, who was fairly short, really cute guy, when the boys came back from England, they had a bootlegged copy of Sgt. Pepper. So none of us had ever heard the Sgt. Pepper album yet, because it hadn't even, I don't think it was even printed. And so in our private plane, we had Sgt. Pepper piped through. So we got to listen to Sgt. Pepper while we were, among other things, but while we were flying from city to city. And by the time we got to New York, I think we were all in a new mode. And that's an intro to saying that one of the Sundowners had like a Sergeant Pepper's kind of a military jacket of some kind that and he let me borrow it. And so I got to wear this jacket for 1 or 2 cities or sometime or other until he asked politely for it back again. So I had to give it back to him. But things, sort of being on a tour for 2 months was like 2 years. Everything changed so much in that period of time. At least I know for me, and I think for a lot of us, as we went from city to city, and the rock world was changing, everything was changing.
What were the concerts like? The actual concerts, were they complete pandemonium?
Yes, they were complete pandemonium. You from the curtain, you could peek out, and you could just see this sea of kids and this excitement and all this noise going on, waiting for things to happen. And I remember one in particular, one concert when I decided to go out into the audience and just hang around. And this man, maybe he saw me coming down the side stairs or something. This man comes up to me. He was an adult. He wasn't a kid. He wasn't a fan. And he said, they're not really playing those instruments. And I was like insulted. And I said, what do you mean they're not playing those instruments? And of course they're playing those instruments. No, they're not really singing. They're making it all, it's all whatever. And he was so sure of himself. And he was like this naysayer who just wanted to pop your balloon and tell you that, you're stupid for thinking they're really playing their instruments. And I remember that. I remember being so upset at this man who wouldn't believe me. My memory was that each of one of them had their own temperament. And sometimes, something would upset them. I think, at one time I remember at some motel that we were in, and I remember Peter trying to get from his motel room probably somewhere else, and some girl went up to him and pulled at him and broke all of his love beads. And I remember he was so upset and angry, but he didn't want to take it out on her, but it really upset him. And little things like that it can set you off for the day. In other words, I remember that in particular just because I witnessed it. Michael seemed to have only one temperament, which was reserved and not emotional. Davy was, Mr. Showman and he was always friendly and kind, but I think because of his fame early on as the Artful Dodger and where his background was, I think he was always had a protected, area where he didn't trust you because he didn't want, when you're famous, you just can't let people in. You can't let people in. Otherwise, it's like the invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing. So maybe that describes Davy a little bit better. And Mickey was pretty much a free spirit. Peter was friends with the Buffalo Springfield. The Buffalo were in the office. All Stephen Stills would come in the office. A lot of their friends would come through the front door. We never knew who to expect. And at the same time, soon after I was there, I think Bob Rafelson was probably already working on the script for Head, which was the Monkee movie. and Bert was working with Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper on Easy Rider. So Jack Nicholson was in the office all the time. Now, Jack was in his mid-20s, I think. He's not much older than I am. And I had not a clue who he was. But he was the nicest guy I ever met. He was funny. He was exactly the roles that you've seen him in films where he's a nice guy and he's funny. That's who he was. He was just great. So that's why Jack was there all the time. So there was this cadre of different, friends of the boys that were also musicians who were in and out of the office all the time. It's a wonder we got any work done at all.
Do you recall any particular stories about Jack?
Let's see. I know he used to pretend to play golf. So he'd be at one end of the building and the other end, and then he'd tee off and he'd pretend. I mean, God knows he'd kill somebody if he hit him with a real ball, but he would pretend to do that. And I just remember him being funny and being nice, and he has a very magnetic personality.
So describe Bert and Bob to me. What your relationship with them was?
I met them both for the first time on the Clarksville train. Bob, I always liked Bob much more than Bert because Bert was kind of scary. Bert was about 6'5", I think, real tall, real thin, and had piercing blue eyes. And I found him a little bit intimidating, whereas Bob was kind and friendly and hi, how are you, and that kind of stuff, and very relaxed in his office. Bert's office, which was at the very end, opposite from where my office was at the end, Bert's office door was very often closed. I'm sure he had he was like the executive. And Bob was more the creative guy. And that's probably why I liked him better, because I could relate to that. I can relate to that kind of personality. I remember Bob laughing more, and I don't remember ever seeing Bert laugh. He was part of the crew of people that were just in this. It was like a family. It wasn't an office. It was a family of people who were all creative, and that is an amazing, experience in itself.
So how was the organization to work for? I guess you kind of just explained it, but how were they as bosses?
Raybert had none of those rules. If you needed a day off, you just asked. But you were expected to do your job. I would never, need a day off when I had something that I had to do. So that wasn't the case. Another person I didn't mention, but another person that I got to know a little bit was Henry Diltz, who was the photographer. I first met Henry probably not until the tour, but Henry was with us on the tour, and he took fantastic pictures. Henry had a smile and a face similar to Mickey's, and kind and sweet and good-natured, and the people that I worked with all during that period, except for the Screen Gems Brass, everybody was good. Everybody was kind. Everybody was caring. It was something. Having worked in many places since then, nothing ever comes close to those few years that I was there.
Wow. It sounds like paradise, what you just
Well,
described.
it was.
I don't know. I don't know what that's like.
I agree. I know.
Uh, what do you remember of the other people on the lot? Did you know Jackie Cooper? Did you know any of the directors? I believe you mentioned Jerry Shepard. You would go and
Yeah,
watch and edit. Tell me
Jerry.
about Jerry Shepard.
Okay, Jerry Shepard. Jerry was a character. Jerry was an editor, and so as I got comfortable with going downstairs to go on to the Screen Gems lot, there were sound stages everywhere. Not as big as Warner Brothers, of course, but it was a small studio. And so Jerry's editing little building, which was like the size of a living room, it was really small. That's where he and his editors worked. And so I'd go in and see what he was doing, and they had a moviola, so things were automated to some extent, but you had to be able to slow it down so that you look at it frame by frame to see what you wanted to edit. And then all of these strips of film were hanging up there from different scenes, and they, so that they could move them around and decide what they wanted to use. And Jerry was so friendly, and it sounds like a broken record, but these guys this was a great experience for me. I do remember Jackie Cooper was the head of the studios, and I do remember one day Jackie everybody was called to Gower Gulch which was sort of a gathering, and I think there were little eateries in there or something. And Jackie gave talked to everybody about something. Do I remember what that was? No, but it was to all the employees he wanted to tell something. So that was exciting, because to me, Jackie Cooper was a movie star, not that of a studio. So I was kind of like, well, this is pretty exciting. And I have to say, they were also filming at some point Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And so I saw Katharine Hepburn putting something in the trunk of her car one time. That was that was the closest I got to her. So there were a lot of different people. And later on, a few years later, when the Monkees series ended and I went upstairs to work in the Columbia part, I got to ride in an elevator with Anthony Quinn, who was one of my heartthrobs. I've always loved Anthony Quinn. So, there were always movie stars on the lot. Julie Newmar was there a lot. Frank Zappa, was on the tour. I didn't tell you this. You want me to tell you about Frank Zappa on the tour?
Why, of course.
Yeah. So whenever we would get into a town, depending on the town, if it was a city, we were in a hotel, usually on the top floor. And if we were in a smaller city, we were in a motel, which was usually single-story places. And this one motel, and it was summertime, so it was hot, and there was a pool. And in the evening, I seem to remember that we all had our motel door rooms open, and people would be, gathering and talking. And very often the boys would get together and play their guitars and sing and fool around. And at this one place, Frank Zappa showed up, and the owner of the motel opened up their little coffee shop. And so we all went over to this coffee shop. It wasn't that big, and there maybe had been 10 or 15 of us in there, and Frank and the boys were playing their instruments. And I just remember Frank singing "Brown Shoes Don't Make It." And to this day, became very fond of him because of that song. But it was very exciting just to be around. And I considered myself a real outsider, but I was privileged to be treated as one of the group, and that was really exciting. Frank, Also, when we were in New York, the Byrds showed up. I don't remember all the names of the guys in the Byrds, but the Byrds were there up in the room where my birthday party was. It might have not have been the same night, but that was sort of a gathering in the evenings. And one of the Byrds, was talking to one of them, and I had said that I had never been to New York City before, and I really didn't even know where Fifth Avenue was. He promptly took me downstairs and took me for a walk in New York, probably at midnight, and we went and looked at all the fancy stores. And that was really, really kind of him. And I remember we had a really great talk. And what it was about, I have no idea, but probably about, what it was like to work for the Monkees, or, what was going on in the world. I don't know what it was about, but it was really nice of him to do that. And those are the kinds of things that happened just spontaneously. You don't expect them, just like you don't expect Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper to walk in the room, or Stephen Stills to walk in the room. It was, and I don't think those kinds of things happen today. That was the beginning of something that became an industry.
Wow. You were sometimes mistaken as Davy Jones because you had similar stature and you had a similar haircut.
Yeah, I did.
Tell me about the time
when
fans insisted that you sign something for them.
Yeah, we were. Well, part of the problem was when we would leave, especially in the big cities, when we would leave the hotel, there were hundreds of kids outside, and Marilyn and I were the only women workers on the tour. And so Marilyn Schlossberg had been with them from the beginning. Her name is now La Salandra at the end. And Marilyn was really, really in charge. She was just a brilliant, wonderful, person. And anyway, Marilyn and I got in the second limo always, and whoever else, I don't remember who else was with us, but it might have been, for instance, Lynn Randell and her manager who was with her. Anyway, because I had this haircut, we had a hair cutter. Michael Graver was the what do you call them? Not just a hair cutter, but he cut everybody's hair. And my hair was cut just like Davy's. And so when we managed to get in the limos with all of our security guards, pushing us in the limo, women would jump on the limo. They would jump on the back window and they would bang themselves up against the front. And this one time, and I think it was at the Warwick in New York, this girl was sure that I was Davy. And she was crying and sobbing. And so we rolled down the window and she passed her shoe. She passed her shoe in, and I signed Davy's name on the shoe. And I sent it back to her. And I had talked to you about this before. And I said, I don't know whether I want to say that on screen, because maybe she's had this shoe for 50 years and thinks it was Davy's signature. So at any rate,
well, she's had 50 years to adjust to reality.
Yeah, she has.
Did they ever actually sign anything?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. They had, they had albums. They signed a lot of albums. They had a lot of special requests that probably came from Bert and Bob and their friends. So sure, absolutely. There were mostly, as I recall, albums. I mean, I never had them come over to my desk and say, would you sign a dozen of these? I would never have done that. So they didn't sign. I didn't personally have them sign anything, but, a lot of personal requests came for them. I'll tell you, I guess I can say it now 50 years later. I had never smoked pot. And I learned how to smoke pot on the tour because we had pot on the plane. And so I went into that tour a normal, straight high school graduate, and I came off of that tour a hippie. That's how my life changed in 2 months. I wanted to be Janis Joplin. I let my hair grow, and my boyfriend met me at the airport at the end of the tour, and he had become a hippie in the meantime, because we lived in the Hollywood Hills, very close to the Sunset Strip. And so he was riding his motorcycle up and down the Sunset Strip all the time, picking up girls, I was later to find out. But, and when the Buffalo came out with "There's Something Happening Here," that was my world at that time. The cohesiveness and the focus of the first season shifted so much in the second season. And I think it was really a reflection of the culture. Everything was changing. And we had heretofore, my memory of life from when I entered first grade until I graduated high school, nothing much changed. But afterwards it did. I never mentioned to you before, but I went to school in Tucson, Arizona, and Linda Ronstadt and I were in choir together because I wanted to be a singer. And needless to say, I did not have Linda's voice, which was tremendous. But Linda was around all the time, and they started the Stone Ponies, and she became famous during that time. So I was not in Linda's group, in Linda's circle, so I knew of her, and I knew hello to her to say hello, but it was interesting that I've been around so many people that became famous.
Yeah, and Michael wrote her first big hit, Different Drum.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Michael wrote that.
Yeah, I just heard it the other day on the radio. Yeah.
What do you recall about the transition from the television series to the motion picture head? You were there for that.
I think that the boys had already begun their separate lives. It wasn't necessarily a divorce, but their personalities, just like mine and everybody else's, had begun to grow up and to grow into who they became. And when you're 21, 22, 23, you're in that growth stage where sometimes you have blossomed, but for the most part, a lot of things became very open and available to them because they had that fame. And so, they wanted to do their own thing. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't, become who you were 2 years ago. You have to keep going, or you stagnate and you lose your creativity. So that's what was happening with all of them in all their own ways.
Did you spend any time at their homes during that period?
I went to Mickey, my boyfriend and I were invited to Mickey's house in Laurel Canyon to see his Moog synthesizer when he got it. And I remember that and how excited he was with it, and the sounds that came out of it were just unbelievable. And so that was exciting. That was really.
So you had a Moog synthesizer unveiling party?
Well, I don't know whether it was unveiling. I'm sure he unveiled it the minute it arrived, but it was all set up, and he had people over, I'm sure, all the time because he was so excited about it. Yeah.
What about David? Never to his place?
No. No. Davey and I weren't. Maybe we didn't relate to each other particularly. I didn't know, he was shy, and I didn't know him well. No. Peter and Michael, I got to know a lot better. Yeah.
There was the famous Christmas episode where all the cast and co-workers were introduced at the end. You were there, right?
Yes, I was there. it was wonderful to see everybody together. It was very chaotic. I couldn't tell you a specific thing that happened, or other than it was nice to be included in a big picture like that. It was holiday time, it was Christmas time. And so Bert came out of his office and he had this big, I guess it was on a, my memory is it was on a tray. And there were all these things like a hot dog rolled up in aluminum foil, and he gave one to each of us. And it was a lid of grass. And so my first Christmas of being given a gift by my boss was a lid of grass. And I take that as a a token of honor that not many people can say in those days that your boss gave you a lid of grass. So that was great. It was always exciting to go down to the set and see what they were doing and see what show they were filming. I never got to go to the ranch.
Tell me about Lenny's Boot Parlor.
Yeah. Everybody liked to go to Lenny's Boot Parlor. It was a strange little, it was on Gower, and the entrance to it, I think this is maybe more like New York City, which I've really never been in, but where they have the iron gates that you pull open and then you go in. Well, Lenny's Boot Parlor wasn't a store that was by itself. It was embedded in the Columbia Pictures studio wall. And I'm sure there were entrances to other things maybe there. I don't remember that. But Lenny had this array of all kinds of boots and shoes and leather jackets and wonderful things. And he had these sunglasses, these rose-colored sunglasses, and that Michael has, there are lots of pictures with Michael, and I had a pair of rose-colored sunglasses until someone broke into my car and stole them. So I don't have them anymore, unfortunately, but they were really wonderful to wear and to, see the world through rose-colored glasses. It was really, really great. Working there changed my life, set me on a trajectory that to this day carries me forward. I am who I am because of those people. I have become myself through the gift of those few years with those creative people.
So, which leads me to the question that I often ask each guest is, did the Monkees change your life? And I guess the answer for you would be yes.
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. I remember, because I was always backstage during the performance, or I could walk around and be in the front. They said backstage. And I remember when we were waiting, when the other groups were on first, Michael would drift over to me and we would sit and talk. Now, what we would talk about, I honestly don't remember, but I enjoyed his company. He was always thoughtful and quiet, unlike, I think I described Mickey, who was just really all over the place. And Peter was much more emotional and gentle, and I'm sure we hugged many times. He was a hugger. He was a really lovely soul. And Davy, I just didn't know well. I don't know why that is. I think I was a little I don't say he intimidated me, but I was intimidated by his presence because he was so famous. He had that English accent. He was absolutely adorable, handsome, gorgeous guy. And I think that intimidated me. as a, being a young kid, and I love men, and I was always attracted to almost everybody. So, but Davy and I just didn't hit it off. Before I was there, Marilyn, of course, Marilyn knew everybody because she was with Bert and Bob from the beginning.
Talk about Marilyn a little.
Marilyn
Schlossberg.
Yeah. Marilyn, I was scared to death of Marilyn. She was no nonsense. She was smart as a whip. She knew everything, and she wasn't, I'm pretty emotional, if you can't tell, and I'm pretty gregarious. And Marilyn was reserved and probably had a million things to do. I don't even know all of the work that she did, but she was very focused, and she was brilliant. I remember her. I remember thinking, God, this woman knows everything. You know what? It was like living in a movie for a couple of years. That's what my life was like for a couple of years. So.
Why did you leave? Why did you not? What prompted you to leave at all?
I left for a couple of reasons. I didn't get along with a guy that they had hired, Floyd Ackerman, to replace Don. He had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth all the time. He was a New York agent, and he had represented an actor whose name I think was John Nesbitt. And he could never say Nesbith. So Michael Nesbith was Michael Nesbitt, or just Nesbitt to him.
Well, we've got to.
Well, I thought it was pretty crazy to me. I mean, and he was representing Sajid Khan. I don't think he was representing Bobby Sherman. Bobby Sherman was in the office all the time.
That was Ward's guy.
That was Ward's guy, right? But I don't know who else he was. I know he was representing Sajid because he didn't know I left because of him. He was filming a show with Sajid Khan and other people. I don't remember.
Must have been Sajid's television special.
Yes, that was it.
Yeah.
So he hired me to do something there, I guess, organize. I don't remember what it was. So he never knew he was the reason that I left. He called me in 1969 to work on that Sajid Khan special. And that was just a one-off deal. It was just a one afternoon. I don't remember, have no memory of what I did there. I met Sajid. We hit it off immediately. I really liked him. He was attracted to me, and, that was very interesting in and of itself. And, and I thought he was a pretty hot guy myself, but, I just knew them for that afternoon. My memory was that the taping did not go well. So that it was not well organized. And I have to be honest with you, if Floyd had anything to do with it, I'm not surprised.
What power did he have to make your life so miserable?
Okay, he didn't really make my life miserable. I just didn't like him. And I think I mentioned this to you. He had started, he was representing other people. And who had started billing Raybert or Screen Gems or whomever for his personal people to avoid, paying for them himself, or billing, whoever. And I didn't like that at all. And so that's when I decided. I went into Bert, and I said, I needed to leave. And he said, the first thing he said to me was, "What's the matter? Are you pregnant?" Which shocked me. And I said, "No, I'm not pregnant."
Yes, and Davy's very happy about it.
Yeah, right. I'd been taking birth control pills, so I was not pregnant. And I said, no. And I said to him just what I'm saying to you is I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't belong anywhere. And I certainly didn't belong working for Floyd Ackerman. I don't know actually if I don't think I mentioned Floyd to Bert. I don't think that what was important to me was that I had a life that I couldn't relate to outside of work. And if I didn't take charge of that, I wouldn't know who I was. And I wanted to ask him if he would fire me so that I could collect unemployment, because I had been the breadwinner. And so if I wasn't going to get a salary and my boyfriend, who was a mechanic, didn't get his act together, then we were not going to be able to pay our rent. So that was, that was the nuts and bolts of what happened. That's what happened. That's why I left. When you're living it, you don't know it's happening, but what is it? You don't know what is it Bob Dylan says? You don't know what's happening, do you, Mr. Jones?
Well, just compare the first episode, a filmed episode of the Monkees, with the last filmed episode of the Monkees, and it's two completely different things, and it's a calendar year and a half maybe apart.
Right.
Which is unbelievable.
And I think another thing is also the boys were really themselves. They weren't actors. And so it's really hard not to be yourself. And as they all changed during that second season, they couldn't pretend anymore. That's my opinion.
Do you remember anything? Do you remember when a girl mailed herself to Davy?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that was at the Warwick Hotel. And we had a wonderful private security staff, Jim, somebody who was the head of security. And so this big box arrived. It was like, maybe like this. And I remember it being wheeled up to the floor where we all were. I remember this box being on a dolly and being moved in and plunked down there and then opened up. And there they were, two of them, I think. So, yeah, that was really, talk about chutzpah and just pure innocent desire.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your Monkee memories with me. It's been a really interesting episode. I think a lot of interesting details. Thank you so much, Barbara, for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be a part of it. That everybody talking about their little experience, along the way, helps to put the pieces together. So it changed my life for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I hope you've enjoyed episode 4 of the MonkeesPad show with special guest Barbara Hammacker. If you'd like us to continue with this program, it's important you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments, please write us at TheMonkeesPad@yahoo.com. I'd like to thank Michael Promerico for his technical assistance. Special thanks to Gary Strobel. And a shout out to Zilch Podcast and the Monkees Live Almanac. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.